you all for your patience with that.
Local
Um,
democracy in action over Zoom.
and before we start the voting, I will just do a quick mention. Yes, you can get naloxone kits at the library. I posted some resource information from Naloxone Utah in the chat and did a quick check. We are currently out of kits. So if you do come to the library to get one, do check back periodically. We're waiting. We're in a waiting list to receive additional resources. So
I am not going to be surprised if this interaction fast tracks that.
Patrick, they picked up 100 kits today, just so you know, they have them.
Oh.
They picked up 100 today.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much for the additional update. Okay, with that in mind, we will go ahead and move into the voting. I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll for you. We will have 30 seconds to vote.
Let's see. Kevin wishes to speak before voting.
Okay.
Kevin, let's see where you are so we can unmute you.
Hello, I am here.
Hi, Kevin. Could you hold the microphone a little closer to your mouth?
Can you hear me?
Pretty well.
It's a headset, so.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Y'all can hear me just fine? Sorry, I'm outside. Multiple tasks this evening. So, if we're gonna vote, I assume that he would share some of what his vision is and such, but that didn't occur. I just want to reiterate my wholesale opposition to voting in a member of our board who has a conflict of interest, who has stated that his interest is to represent a small part of our neighborhood. That to me makes absolutely no sense. And I emailed that to all of you. I think most of you that are here, but if we're about to vote, I wanted to reiterate my opposition. That's all I have to say. Conflict of interest, Kevin, and more resources that the other members don't have. Thank you much.
Thank you, Kevin. I think we all represent geographic areas of our neighborhood to some extent. I know I can't help but notice what happens out my front window on Merrimack Avenue more than what happens in front of your house. I know, Jeff and I tend to notice similar things because we only live a block apart. And I know, for example, Sarah's experience is different because she lives closer to you, south of 1700. And I think it would be great to have a representative who lives closer to 900 South, which is still part of our neighborhood, but to get that perspective.
And while I have no objection, I don't know if I can be heard or not. So just like wave or something, say yes. Yes, okay, just make sure. While I have no objection to having members from different parts of the community, I object to having a member of the council who is supported by his own community council, who has his own little council, and he's there specifically to represent that council and that area, which is what he has stated, what has been stated and what has been proposed.
Doug, would you like to offer any clarifying statements about how you view your role on the Ballpark Community Council?
I view my role as a little bit as much as every other member. Yes, I am a part of the Central 9th Community Council, but we currently don't have a chair. And so I do get the views and opinions of the people on that board as well. But at the end of the day, I'm still just another member of the community voting. I don't think that our community, the Central 9th is really removed from Ballpark. We're all the same, and quite frankly, I'm technically a part of the Ballpark. I don't actually fall into Central 9th. I'm just in their what the area that they allow to have their members, their community council members in. So I don't view my role as much different than any other member of the Ballpark. If that helps explain anything that any questions Kevin had.
Kevin, do you have any follow-up questions or clarifications?
And it's not so much a question as a statement, and I still sit with it. I could pull up the email and I could read it back to you. But what was proposed was that we have a members. I don't know, Mr. Flagle. We've never met. I don't have any personal objection to you. And if you would come and say, "Hey, I'd like to be a part of the community council," so I'd like to be a part of the community council to represent this community, the greater community, then I would have had absolutely no objection. It's good to have more involvement. It's good to have more people from more places. But that's not what was proposed. What was proposed was that the essential dissolution of the Central Ninth Council, in order to, dissolution somewhat, it would still maintain itself as a body, but without a head, and that head would be represented on the ballpark by a member that was presented from that council to sit on our board. I think that's inappropriate. I see that as a conflict of interest. I still oppose it, still object to it, and I wanted to state that before we vote. Anyone, you don't have to agree with me. That's perfectly fine. And like I said, it's nothing personal. If that wasn't the way that it had been posed, I wouldn't be stating what I'm stating. But I think that the people that are going to vote have a right to know a little bit more about that circumstance, rather than just, hey, there's someone who's interested in joining our board.
Kevin's totally right. The Central Ninth Community Council currently does not have a chair. Paul Johnson resigned as chair in January, and they have done a search for leadership, and no one is currently willing to take on that role, as I understand it. The borders of the Ballpark Community Council have always overlapped with the Central Ninth Community Council, and we thought that a solution, at least temporarily, would be that we would offer to serve as leadership and their community voice, and then having Doug, a former community leader in Central Ninth, would be a great addition to our board for every reason. And that is the situation as I understand it. And I'm trying to be 100% transparent.
Why don't we read the email of what was proposed then? I mean, we can do that. I can do that. If you'd like to, you're welcome here in front of the computer. And then we can just, that was the proposal. The proposal wasn't, let's have someone who's very experienced and has a lot of understanding of the neighborhood join our council. That'd be a very different proposal. The proposal was, we'd like the ballpark to represent the Central Ninth, and Mr. Flagle to be the representative on our board, a full voting member for our board, but representing Central Ninth, advised by their council and receiving full support, having their own Facebook page, their own resources, their own bank account, which gives them an unfair advantage over all the other ballpark board members. So if we're being transparent, let's read the email to all the people that are of the neighborhood that are present that are going to vote.
I guess I don't view what you said as being different from what I just said, but if you would, I think one of the reasons I don't want to embarrass anybody from Central Ninth. It's kind of a bummer when you had a community council and don't have leadership in that council anymore. I'm not interested in
the Ninth. The ballpark. I wouldn't object to that. But that's not what they suggested. If it was temporary, if we were saying we're going to do this for a period of 1 year, then I probably wouldn't object to that also. But that's, again, not what was suggested.
Well, I guess right now we just nominated Doug to be a board member on the Ballpark Community Council.
I've said my piece. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm entitled to that, just as every other person is. I'd love to have the email read that suggested this merger. But again, I've said my piece, and that was what I desired to do.
Doug, do you have any more clarifications from your community members?
I mean, the Central Ninth, I mean, right now we're trying to decide what our future is, if that is still being a council. We're basically trying to figure out our future, because we've had some departures of some of our members that have been serving for a long time, and Quite frankly, I think most of the Central Ninth Community Council members are really new to this and are even unsure. I mean, I'm really new to the Central Ninth Community Council. I not even always sure of my role with that. And so it's great for me to be a part of the ballpark and to understand the community council process. And I don't think my role is to shake up anything in the community council or to cause any issues. It's just I just think it's having you, especially Amy, as kind of a leadership for our community council as we figure out our future is a very helpful thing for us. So.
For what it's worth, if I may, I will say we're not Chicago. I don't think that necessarily they're gonna, I don't know, put high rises all around everywhere except for the Central Ninth or something like that. It's more of a principle stance that I take. It's in principle, I object to the notion of bringing someone on with all the full voting rights of any board member on our council who is there to represent another council. Does that make sense? Like I said, it's nothing personal. I don't know you. I don't think we've ever met. Maybe we have. I don't know.
Yeah, we've met a few times back a few years ago. It's been a long time.
It's been a while. Like COVID killed everything. But
yes.
it's not, again, nothing personal in any sense whatsoever. I don't think you're a bad guy. I don't know your voting history. I know Central Ninth belonged to us. Or when I say belong to us, I mean they were a part of us, a part of the family at one point. They chose to break away. I'd be happy if they chose to rejoin us. I have no objection to that. It's not a, hey, we hate Central Ninth. It's just I think that we should represent Central Ninth and the rest of the ballpark, and that every board member should be committed to that.
I feel that I'm not just Central Ninth. If I'm joining this board, I'm a part of the entire community. So I don't want to be held to that there's some sway that Central Ninth is going to dictate everything that I do. So.
And George says, get to it.
Yeah, Rachel, you raised your hand and I don't currently have the ability to unmute you, but I would love to be able to unmute you if you would like to make a comment.
Oh, I just wanted to say that I am one of the Central Ninth, community members who has been supporting Doug to try to integrate into the ballpark as we go through this kind of difficult time of searching for leadership. We had set ourselves perhaps a year timeline of trying to figure out what a more concrete proposal would be for our own community to decide, do we dissolve the Central Ninth as a community? Do we continue as our own community? And I think there have always been overlaps between the two. I've lived in what is now called Central Ninth for 14 years, 16 years. But it's, I think that what we're just trying to do is to find our strongest way to stay active as a community and integrate our voices together with the larger community at a time when we don't have people that are stepping up to be the leaders for our own meetings. So I think it's a natural fit. It's been something that we've worked together before, and I just wanted to say how grateful I am to Doug for putting himself out there, and to Amy for entertaining this, and both communities for understanding that there's a lot of different highs and lows in any kind of community growth.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you for that comment.
I don't know how to raise my hand, but if I could say something for a moment. I feel like this is more of a subcommittee than anything else. I feel like that we want someone from that area to be a voice on our council, and I think that it's not. I can't see that it's particularly a conflict of interest. I think it's more along the lines of synergy is how I view it. So that's my take on it. If anybody feels like we should have a term limit to it, like it's just a temporary inclusion. Maybe that can be discussed. If anyone thinks it should be modified, I think we can discuss it.
So
I
Amy,
greedily want to hold on to all community volunteers as long as we possibly can. But I don't want anyone to burn out because, you know, it's a loss when people leave the community for whatever reason. I still tear up when I think about Terrell Bottling and Shelley moving out of the community.
My
Amy,
opinion, if Central Ninth and all the council members wanted to come over to Ballpark and we were just dissolving the Central Ninth and being one full ballpark, and they all said, hey, we want to join the board, I probably would have no objection unless they said, you know, we're only representing Central Ninth. In fact, that'd be awesome. Like Amy, I love more volunteers.
I'm not interested in pushing them to dissolve. That's not my role as a community member or
That wasn't my
advocate.
statement, actually, Amy.
Okay, I'm sorry, I mischaracterized it.
Thank you.
I would love to call this to a vote if people were ready to do that. And to be clear, I think we're voting on Doug joining our board as a normal voting member with the same voting rights as all other board members. Patrick, Zoom controller, would you be so kind as to administer the vote? Could we please mute folks who are not currently talking?
Yes, sorry, one moment. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and launch the poll. 30 seconds for voting. We have 10 seconds remaining. Okay, we're going to end the poll and share the results. Are you all able to view the results?
Mhm.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Doug, welcome to the board.
thanks for having me. I
You get to do glamorous things like vote on zoning proposals.
They're not glamorous, but they're important.
Love it. Okay, moving right along. Let's hear about Nanette Larson. I'm sorry I called on you too early, but if you are with us, I would love to move forward.
Okay, great. I am just going to share my screen. Oh, I cannot. Am I able? Can someone give me permission or?
Yes, one moment.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Administering a poll is actually not as easy, intuitive as one might expect. So
Okay,
thank you,
Nanette.
Patrick.
Oh, you're welcome. Nanette, you are now should now be able to share your screen.
Okay, great. All right, is everyone able to see the Ballpark Station Area Plan display? Great, okay. So I'm here just going over a couple of the modifications that we made to the proposed Ballpark Station Area Plan, which is a small area plan that encompasses a large portion of the ballpark neighborhood. These are just the first modifications that staff has made. We're expecting to make more modifications, and I'm not going to talk about this very long since there was a presentation about the larger plan in December, and there was a large discussion with Ballpark Community Councils and Central Ninth Community Council. So just a brief overview of the timeline. The project began December 2020. It was a 9-month process identifying goals and going through community engagement. And this was done with the GSBS, which was the city's consultant that was hired and brought on board for this project. Right now we're in the public outreach process and it's ongoing. So right now we're doing modifications to the draft based on the feedback that we get from the community. Next will be a public hearing that's scheduled with the Planning Commission. It's a possible end of spring 22, but this in reality is, I'm hoping for at this point, June. I think right now it's tentatively June 22nd, but we will be notifying you once that date is set. We'll be sending out another updated email if you've all entered in your information on the project webpage. And then once the Planning Commission has had a chance to hear the proposed plan and make their recommendations and modifications, it would be continuing to City Council. And City Council would also be making modifications, and it's with City Council that the final decision on the proposed plan is made. So the modifications were all based on comments that we received from the community. We haven't addressed all of the comments we've received because we had this meeting in February, and it's taken this long to get those comments together and modifications to the proposed plan made. The next modifications, we're expecting them to be faster since city staff will be able to dedicate more time to it, and we'll have the master documents. We won't have to go through the consultants again. So the first modification that we made was instead of a recommendation in the heart of the neighborhood for a building height of, I believe it was 120 feet, we just changed this to 8 or 10 stories. The next modification was a clarification of character areas.
Hi, Nanette, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you, one of the things that we have going on is this plan. Simultaneously, there's also affordable housing incentives that are being proposed by the city. Could you tell us what those heights would look like after affordable housing incentives had been applied to that? What would the new maximum heights be, or would they not be changed?
It really would depend on the proposed project. So I believe the affordable housing overlay right now, and that hasn't been heard, that goes to Planning Commission, I believe this month. I believe for the affordable housing overlay, you're allowed 1 additional story in height. And so and I believe this area would fall within that overlay district. And so if there was a proposal for affordable housing, they would have to meet certain AMI standards. And I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head what those AMI standards would be for additional height, but it would be 1 additional building story in height that would be allowed. So the other modification was the clarification of character areas. We just found that there was a lot of confusion in the proposed plan about what the character area was. So their description of the existing built environment conditions within each area. This doesn't necessarily affect you know, the zoning districts that are proposed, that would be proposed in the neighborhood. But it kind of, it discusses the built scale, street corridors, density, land uses, and transit. The third modification, we had a few comments about pocket parks and finding creative solutions to the green space in the ballpark neighborhood. There was a lot of concern there. So we added additional language, find creative solutions to enhance green space to the proposed plan to make sure that green space is being accounted for. The larger changes that we made to the ballpark plan was the future land use map. So the first change we made was extend the Main Street area on the future land use map to include the west side of Richard Street. And the second change was a large.
Could you go back and tell us what that means?
Okay. So on the initial plan, we had the proposal did not include this west portion of Richard Street in the Main Street area. It included at the time it was labeled medium density residential. And someone from the neighborhood, I don't remember their name, had pointed out to us how the west side of Richard Street is very similar to the east side of Richard Street. And you know, they definitely had a point. So the Main Street, the medium density residential area, which has since changed, you know, was more of a similar area where it's residential with mixed use areas, where the west side of Richard Street better fit in the Main Street area. It's more commercial. I believe there's a few businesses, and the scale of the buildings, I think that they're fairly low rise buildings.
Could you maybe talk about which blocks of Richard Street that you mean? Because on, you know, in the parts of Richard Street that are closest to me, there is no commercial whatsoever. It's only single family homes and duplexes.
It's just a small portion. Are you able to see my cursor on the screen?
Yes, if I look very closely.
So I highlighted this area. Are you able to see where I've highlighted? This is the area that was changed on the future land use map to include the west side of Richard Street. It's really small. This used to jog in, and now it's just a straight line down to the heart of the neighborhood.
Great, I appreciate that. I think that's even that area of Richard Street might be where we have a business that was just featured in the Salt Lake Tribune that's converting high-end luxury cars into electric vehicles. So now I get the point. Thank you.
Okay, great. And then the larger change that we made to the future land use map is initially it was labeled medium density residential, and we created Jefferson Park mixed use area. This was a section where we received the most comments through email. So we did change the future land use designation to Jefferson Park mixed use area, and we created a new description of that area. So this new area separates out avenues versus north-south streets. So it'd be 200 West or West Temple, where 200 West and West Temple would allow for buildings that are approximately 5 to 7 stories, where smaller building scales would be more appropriate on the avenue streets, and that would consist of approximately 2 to 3 stories. The areas along 200 West and West Temple are recommended for mixed use. So it'd be places for live, work, and play in the community, where the avenues and the smaller scale would be mostly, would be more appropriate with medium density residential. And that is this area here in the light yellow. And that is really all the changes that we've made. So fairly minor changes to the Ballpark Station area. We're looking at doing a second modification to the plan based on the feedback from the community. We've had really good feedback already, but if you haven't done so already, to put in your information on the project website so you can receive updates to the project as it goes to Planning Commission and City Council, and as updates to the plan are made in the future. That would be really helpful for staff as we make these modifications. You are welcome to email me with any comments you have. All of the comments that I receive will be visible to Planning Commission and City Council. So even if you don't see the modifications made to the plan based on your comments, those comments are still visible to the Planning Commission and City Council as they make recommendations or vote on the final plan.
Nana, we've had some questions in the community about the library that the mayor alluded to in the announcement of this plan. Could you talk about, but I don't believe that a library is, cited, for example, in this plan. Could you talk about that? And also Sarah Reel's on this call, our board member, Sarah Reel, who also is a board member on the library board. So she could also probably add some really useful detail to this discussion.
And Sarah might have more information on the ongoing process of the creation of that new library. That library is touched on the Ballpark Station. I think it makes a recommendation that that a new library would be beneficial and it would be needed in the neighborhood. Beyond that, there's not really anything specific about the library in the plan. And that's, I don't have much more information than that on the library. I think Sarah might have more than I do.
Yeah, all I have is the update from the library board, which is that when we had proposed our initial budget and presented to the mayor, she asked us to go back to the drawing board and add funding for a ballpark library. What that ballpark library looks like, where it's located, any of those details have not been decided yet, but we did re-vote on our budget and present it to City Council this week that includes funding for a library in ballpark. But other than having dollars, hopefully when the City Council votes, if they do approve that budget, other than that, we don't have any other details.
Sarah, I could add a little bit to that as well. My understanding is that this fiscal year, so starting July 1st through the end of June 2023, has that funding, and that for something similar. Like, do you remember when Sprague Library was being remodeled and they had that temporary library in the firehouse? There's the funding for this year is to get something up and running within the year. So there should be a temporary library that and I'm going to fight for that funding. So assuming that we get that, there should be something as soon as, in the next, within a year, up and operating. But it would be a temporary thing to kind of test what our community wants, what our community needs, what we would use, so that they can have that information first, just have a presence in the neighborhood, but then have that information to plan the future permanent library. My hope, and I think it's the mayor's hope, is that it'll be a permanent sort of branch library, just as, like Marmalade or anything like that. So, but in the short term, we'll have some kind of temporary thing.
Hey, Sash, how's it going? I hear you have a question.
Going pretty well. Yeah, it's for Lynette. And I'm just wondering, kind of with regards to the comments for, making changes and tweaks to the plan, stationary plan, what's the process, and, how do you weight those comments? And I'm wondering do you have to be a resident in that area that's covered by it, or do you, are you commenting as a public citizen or a developer or whatever? How does and how do you weight those comments?
All comments are welcome, whether you're part of the neighborhood or not. We consider all of those comments. We don't really have a weight when we consider those comments. We discuss them as staff, and sometimes staff will disagree with the comment, and the purpose of the comments are to make us aware of what we may have missed in the plan. And so far, the vast majority of the comments have been really helpful in doing those things. There is that potential of the comment where staff will, where we just disagree whether, additional parking is needed or no parking in the neighborhood. Just based on our experience with these master plans and what the community may need is really how we look at each of the comments. But just because staff might disagree with the comment doesn't necessarily mean that the planning commission or city council will. And that's why we make those comments available to each of those public bodies.
And then you probably mentioned this. When is that comment period closing?
So the comment period is ongoing. It's easier to make these modifications before it goes to planning commission. So the earlier we can get these comments, the better it is for the project. Modifications will be made all the way up until it's taken to city council. So we expect planning commission to make a few modifications. We expect city council to make a few modifications. But really, if you're able to get those comments into city staff, it's not just city staff that will look at those comments, it's also planning commission and city council. And it's a lot easier to make those changes before it gets to planning commission.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions, process or content? All right, thank you very much, Nanette. My only request would be next time you release a 111-page plan to please not use 9-point font. It's so hard to read the plan, like physically zooming in and out. And I don't feel like I'm that old yet, but but maybe I am. All right, moving right along, we have a rezone request, and I believe we have Jake here from TAG to speak about Goltz Avenue.
Jordan Atkin here.
Oh, excuse me, Jordan, I apologize.
Hey, totally fine. Let me see. I don't have a lot to share, but if you can pass me the ball, let's see. Oh, geez, here we go again. The beauty of Zoom.
I believe you have a
Sure.
ball now.
Yes, you're welcome to screen share.
All right, bear with me here for a second. Let's try that. See how that goes. Can you see that?
You can see the Ballpark Station Area Plan, yes.
Okay. So I was informed late Monday afternoon that I was going to be presenting today. So bear with me.
Jordan, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
We can also see your desktop. You might want to maximize your window.
Oh, okay.
Can see all the files that you just have sitting there unfiled. No one has files like that. And no one has more than one browser tab open at a time either.
All right.
Not ever. Computer jokes, people. I should keep my day job.
All right, try 2. Okay. So our rezone request is in direct correlation to this map and the plan that Nanette was just presenting. We ended up needing to do this through 3 separate applications for 159 and 163 Goltz, 135 Goltz, and 1061 Jefferson, all of which are, within parcels of each other here on this map. And when we first received this plan, we were really scratching our head about why this particular area was designated as a mid-density area on the map. Most specifically, these circles outline a quarter-mile distance from a rail line. So this is actually one of the more transit-rich areas in the city, being served by both the Ballpark Station 9th South, the freeway off-ramp, State Street, 13th and 9th South buses as well. So in the precedence of most of the other aspects of the city, this would almost always be high density residential area. And even the development pattern that has occurred in this little pocket most recently, right off of 2nd West, just south of the freeway, you have a 4-story apartment building. The most recently constructed project, I believe, is C9 Flats, which is lower in my project, which is a 6-story multifamily building, even the density of the townhomes. So we did not plan on putting forward this proposal. This was directly correlated with this plan, and what we felt was really one of the main ways that we could express what we the vision that we saw for this area as we've acquired some of these parcels. And we were thrilled in the update that we are now being labeled as a Jefferson Park mixed use area. But even within that description, it is not quite aligned, where you may have 5 to 7-story buildings on 2nd West and West Temple, and then they are going to directly abut what is 2 to 3-story structures, which, if there were possibilities for development on existing parcels, would be able to go to 35 feet in height, which would be a full 3-story. So again, we appreciated the update, but it seemed very inconsistent with how the majority of the neighborhood would develop. So this is essentially our neighbor. We're right on the south side of Goltz Avenue, directly across from this 6-story project that was recently zoned to RMU about 3 years ago or so, which allows for 75 feet conditional, and actually can go to 125 feet through a design review process that can be approved.
Would you be so kind as to spell out the acronym for people?
RMU, my understanding, is residential mixed use. And you can see, in this image that I have, this is what a 1-story building would look like. And a 2-story building, you're still going to be looking at the side of a parking garage.
Yeah, is that building actually mixed use? I see a parking garage and residential on top of it.
Yeah.
I've walked by it 100 times and I've never noticed any kind of activation of the bottom floor.
Yeah, there's several zones within the city that the name isn't directly congruent with what the required uses are. I believe it allows for mixed use and residential, but it doesn't require that you have both.
That's helpful. Thank you.
And then this is another map, and again, this purple is the RMU zone. That was a rezone recently. The C9 Flats along Goltz was a rezone. You have considerable RMU on the east side of West Temple, and then to the west of 2nd West, CG, which is general commercial, I believe, allows 60 feet by right and 90 feet conditional. So yeah, and we have. I'm thrilled to see the Repair the World project. I won't try to say what they really were calling it. tree planting here on Jefferson Park. And we think that this park needs eyes on it and needs more bodies and people and activation. And it's just not going to be possible to achieve that with, right now you just have a large fence line along that park and it's the back of people's home. So there can be all sorts of activity back there with nobody seeing it. And a 2-story building is going to essentially do the same thing. We probably would have sought a more intense zone even than what we were proposing. But our initial conversations with staff, we didn't know what other zone to go to. And there's not really a better mid-density zone within the city than the FBUN2, which is highly prevalent in the Central Ninth neighborhood, as you all would know. This is a quick outline. If the parcel's in red, it's not in compliance with the existing zoning of the which is RMF 35 residential mixed use with a height limitation of 35. So almost none of this area is even in compliance to be able to be developed with even a new single family home being built, because it doesn't meet the lot area requirements or the lot frontage requirements. And maybe FBUN1 would be a zone that the city would be putting forward in this Jefferson mixed use area. But
I'm sorry, did we talk about what FBUN2 zoning is?
Form-based urban neighborhood 2, and then form-based urban neighborhood 1. One is less intense, I believe allows 2.5-story buildings, which I'm not sure how you do that either. And FBUN2 is 50-foot height limitation with 4-story maximum. So these are, I threw together so this is a project we did in the FBUN2 zone on 2nd West. This is 5 townhomes with 4 off-street stalls in the rear, directly adjacent to the Jefferson walkway. We could have done a 4-story no parking project here, but wanted to be sensitive to our neighbors and what the city had been part of with the Jefferson walkway, and did a very modest, just 2-story townhome project. I should have got updated photos, but this is 3 stories of residence over a 1-level parking on Washington Street, also in the FBUN2 zone. So these are just some images of, we do not have a specific plan at this time. It was kind of a mad rush to get something put forward before the Planning Commission saw the final draft. We were involved in 933 Washington, which now has a beautiful concrete wall built next to it. This is 24 cell condominiums with 1-to-1 parking. This is a under construction project on Paxton Avenue as one of our ballpark projects. This is 12 for sale townhomes here. And then 238 Paramount, which is directly adjacent. And I know Amy and I have talked about this one before, directly adjacent to the resource center that straddles High Avenue and Paramount. Again, where we felt a dramatic need to have eyeballs on the street, and someone has to go in there and start changing the character of these neighborhoods when no one else, kind of wanted to take it on. So this is our just real high level overview of why we are putting forward our zoning proposal. We think that this area needs more attention within the plan. You have a freeway thoroughfare that cuts through Jefferson with a lot of traffic and a lot of high speed traffic, and the thought that this should be a low density 2 to maybe 3-story zone when you abut a already existing 6-story apartment building it just doesn't add up to me. So that's about all I had. I'm here to answer questions and hopefully gain the support of the community council.
Is it all right if I jump in, Amy? Okay. Yeah, so I live next to some of your lots here. I was a little disappointed that there wasn't a more concrete plan put in place. I was hoping to actually see some plans, but that disappointed to see that there are none. I disagree with what you're saying about the density of our neighborhood and the character of our neighborhood. I don't think it is just because we have one large scale project here does not mean we're a high density neighborhood. With form-based too, you're also removing parking with that. So there would be no parking requirements with form-based too. And so without any plans, there'd be no guarantees that you or somebody else in the future could build micro units without any parking, and already Jefferson Street and most of Goltz are lacking in parking. They're already probably at 100% capacity, much like Central 9th neighborhood is, and that's an issue that Central 9th has been dealing with for quite a while is the parking issue. So I guess I'm curious why you're seeking a rezone before you even have plans in place for projects on these lots. Oh, are you there?
I muted myself, sorry.
Oh.
The city ordinance, I was just saying that might be something that should be considered by both the planning commission and the city council. At present, the city ordinances do not require any plans or concepts to be put forward. And like I mentioned, this was in direct response as soon as we saw the plan. We didn't know what else to do. We did provide our comments, but this was essentially the most aggressive way for us to raise our hand that we saw a different vision. And I'm very sympathetic to what's going on in Central 9th. I spend a lot of time over there. That many developers have chosen a different path with parking, but ultimately that was a decision that was contemplated heavily by the city council when they approved that zone. And we're just trying to work within the confines of what opportunities within the zoning that we do have and what seems to be compatible. This is the challenges that the city is facing with parking, both in the FBUN2 zone, many of the TSA, which is transit station area, in proximity to the transit stops. It is very painful, and it's growing pains as our city matures. But this is an area. I'm not saying you shouldn't have parking, but this is an area that, in theory, should be able to. It is very highly served by transit, and if it's not here, then where should this type of development occur?
I guess why are you asking for form-based too, though? I mean, it's kind of like going from one extreme to the other. It doesn't seem like there's a middle ground here with this. You're wanting something that I don't know necessarily fits with this neighborhood. I know that it seems like, we're, I don't know. I guess I'm just not sure why form-based too, why you didn't choose another, because and I guess my other question is there's nothing stopping you guys from changing these zonings and then selling to those developers that choose to maximize every square inch of these lots without any parking. So, it doesn't, for me, seem like a win for us to have form-based too in these lots without any say of what could go there.
We looked at the applicable zones. We looked at our neighbor directly to the north. We looked at what would be allowed on the streets next to us. you know, we have a 75-foot tall building directly across the street from us. The current zone allows up to 35 feet and 3 stories. So we on our analysis didn't think that being able to go to four stories was a radical deviation from of the potential development pattern. I mean,
But you
there's
could go higher than 4 stories with form based too.
no, it's capped at 4 stories.
But not with the affordable housing overlay.
I'm not an I don't know those regulations and what I can't comment on that. I don't know. But
Lee, I'm trying
do
to unmute you so you can ask your question.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. So yeah, I mean, as Douglas mentioned, like the biggest issue is parking. And actually, if the library guy could give me the share screen option, I'd like to just bring up another thing. All the houses that you showed that you developed, those ones did have parking. But you've also had some developments that are completely devoid of parking. And the 2 big ones that you brought up, there's some key differences to those. First off, the 6-story one, that used to be a church on that entire lot for one. And we had to fight them to make that parking. They wanted to do, as you're proposing, do just street parking with 100 units. And we had to fight them to make those first 2 levels into parking. And the same thing happened on your other example that is over on Meade Avenue and 2nd West. They wanted to make that entire old empty field into all apartment. They wanted to do the same thing. And we had to fight them to actually have a parking lot there. And they both had the space to do it and ended up doing it while losing units. And another key thing about both Goltz and Jefferson Ave is majority of those streets, it's also one way. Goltz is a one-way street for about half of it from Jefferson to West Temple, and Jefferson is completely one way till it rounds the curve and hits West Temple there. Another key factor is of the about 16 houses on Jefferson, about 5 of them actually have driveways. Everyone else has to park on the road. And actually your one property on Jefferson is one of those 5 dwellings with a driveway. And then the ones on Goltz, your 2 that are right next to each other, 539 and 163, that's actually a duplex. And they have off-street parking behind. So my major worry is that you're going to now take away the parking that those places had, and we're already crowded. Any one of those apartment complexes has a party, there's nowhere for them to park at the moment because the street's already full. Goltz Avenue, only about half those dwellings have off-street parking as well. And yeah, so did the screen share happen?
Yes, you can have screen share.
Okay, so can everyone see my screen? This is just Google Maps Street View. This is another one of your projects. You built 856 West Temple and 850 West Temple, and these are both 4-story buildings with about 30 apartments, and they take up the complete lot. I mean, there's not much room between you and the building you built around, and there's nowhere for any of them to park. You do have a vacant lot at the moment. That's the old natural gas station that your tenants are parking in. And I walked there about 30 minutes before that meeting, and there were 35 cars there, not counting the ones on the street. And, you got over 60 units in these 2 locations. That's 60 more cars. You can call it transit-based, like everyone that's going to live there is going to ride the train, but they're not. And we have learned that from the big apartment complex. They claim the same thing, didn't want to build parking, and there's over 100 cars in those 100 apartments. So yeah,
I'd like to clarify that that is an example of what can be built under the FBUN2 zoning. We were not the developer on the project. We sold the land to the group who developed those projects, and it was already zoned FBUN2.
Okay. But we still had to attend city council meetings to get that parking approved, because originally they did not want any of that. They fought tooth and nail over that. And so, yeah, without even a ballpark, what you're trying to build next to us, I mean, I don't want that next to my house. I don't want to be that house in the middle of your two, big slots on a non-major road. That's a key difference as well. This isn't on West Temple. This isn't on Second West. This is on one-way neighborhood roads with already limited parking.
I
Thank you
think
for sharing those visuals, Lee. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. I'd like to say that, that brings up a good point that, if these become form-based too, whatever promises TAG SLC promises us, if they sell the property, it could easily become whatever the next developer would like to see. So.
Is it okay if I hop in with a comment? So hi, everybody. This is my first meeting, so thanks for having me. Yeah, I live on Jefferson in the heart of this area. And I guess I just want to ask for a little bit more nuance from the developers. I think you're kind of stating some things as pretty black or white based off of the tracks hub, that there's an ramp and off ramp from the interstate. And I'd argue that actually the on and off ramp kind of has acted as a barrier and has slowed things down. I can tell you, I sit in this window and I think you said a lot of high speed traffic comes through. There's not some great drivers and people going the wrong way down the street, but I could tally for you and let you know that it is truly not that busy as you're claiming it to be. So I think it's dangerous to propose that this is a little bit different. It's almost like an inner court of other areas in Salt Lake because of the one-way streets and just because of the nature of this area. It's been protected almost by the West Temple into Jefferson. So yeah, I just would ask for a little bit more nuance in you looking, and the C9 development to me is horrendous. I feel so bad for the homes that are right next to it. It sucks out their daylight. It is not compatible with the neighborhood. So I think that's a dangerous precedent to use that as the basis. I get that you would be across the street, but I don't think that is fair for the historic homes that have been in this neighborhood for 100+ years. Obviously neighborhoods change and grow, and they should, but we can't do that overnight. And I love this neighborhood. It's a privilege to be a part of it. And I love the people that I see here. It's a lot of natural occurring affordable housing. And so I'm really, really concerned by development that would happen that would push these families out that couldn't afford to have a yard. I'm a believer that we all should have access to green space. And a lot of these newer developments limit that and make it more expensive. So yeah, I appreciate you coming and discussing what you're looking at, but as a community member, I definitely have a lot of concerns about what was said and what was assumed, which I don't think are correct assumptions of the neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey, and thank you for joining us. Is there another hand? Did I miss it? I feel like I saw another hand.
I got a comment.
Hit it, Sash.
Yeah, so I Ballpark is kind of unique in the kind of the greater Salt Lake area, in that there's a bunch of residential homes, single family homes. And I think as a community member, I have been part of and supported the efforts to maintain that feel. And I feel like that kind of north end of Ballpark, right there by the freeway off ramp, is kind of the starting of that as it goes south. And so I kind of echo the last comment that it's to kind of classify it as some, should be high density or something like that. I think that's a mischaracterization. And I agree the traffic in there is quite calm, especially since they finally put a stop sign there where multiple fatalities, auto pedestrian accidents occurred there. And so it's quite calm in that area. And so I think the C9 and using that as a precedence is that was probably a mistake, and that somehow got through. And I don't think that's a good kind of piece to judge the rest of the the rest of the zoning in that area. And kind of I agree with Amy, like the parking, 2 levels of parking isn't very active. It's not activated, and anything similar to that would be I think a disaster along a park. If that were to be the case, who knows what would happen there, right? There's no plans, no idea of what would be developed there. So I think that's a bit of a struggle for me to kind of hop on board and say, yeah, that sounds good, let's change it and hope for the best. So anyway, that's basically it. I think while maybe ordinance doesn't require you to bring anything to the table, I think probably it's maybe would be useful to try and get the hearts and minds of the community, certainly mine. So, but thanks for taking the time and talking to us.
Thanks, Sash.
Yep.
I have a comment, if that's all right. Yeah, so I live on Goltz. I work from home, and at my position, what I see, I'm watching all the traffic come down Jefferson, come down the one way. So there's definitely no high-speed traffic. I watch it every single day. I have for the last 2 years. There's no high-speed traffic. Like the other person said, we do have issues with people going the wrong way up the one way, but there is no high-speed traffic. Adding many housing units with no parking, it would be a disaster for this neighborhood. We are already at capacity, and the number of buildings and the number of units that are being proposed without any parking that just seems ridiculous. Where would people park? I have a parking pad, but if I have a visitor, people would be forced to park on the next blocks over. If we had 10 more people parking, I would say if we had 10 more people parking on this street, I don't think we can fit 10 more people parking on this street, actually. And so if we put 50 more cars, 100 more cars in the neighborhood, how many blocks over will people park? People staying in apartments, who gets our preference for parking? Are we going to create a zone like we have up by the university where homeowners have a dedicated parking spot with a sign, or is it just a free-for-all for everybody, first come, first serve? So that would be, that's my main concern, honestly. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I know living close to the ballpark, we have talked before about as our neighborhood densifies, as there's more events, we don't have a functional parking permit program in our neighborhoods. If we were to make the neighborhood significantly denser, we would need to instigate one for the reasons that you're describing.
I'll just say to close this out, if there's no more questions, that I hope that the community members who have spoken elect to reach out to Nanette, the city, to voice some of their concerns, because I think what a lot of the issues that are being brought up that might be being pushed onto our proposal are in fact going to be exacerbated at an unimaginable level with this adoption of the master plan. My understanding is that the heart of the neighborhood, which is directly on the opposite side of 200 West, will allow, with what Nanette just said, 8 to 10 story buildings. I'm not sure what zone that they're going to be proposing that, but the amount of density that is going to surround this area is going to be substantial. And maybe today form-based, and if there's another zone, I'm happy to consider it. It may seem the oddity now, but when there's a potentially 10 story buildings lining Second West, it would seem maybe a little more odd to see 2 and 3 story buildings on the streets adjacent. So that's all I would say. I hope everyone reaches out, because the plan's not going the direction that I'm hearing that what the community is hoping for.
All right, I'm going to put the planners. I mean, I agree. Reach out to Nanette, because the station area plan is going to affect a lot of folks, but also with regards to this specific rezone proposal, please reach out to Brooke Olson, and I just put her email address in the chat. Yeah, one of the things, I know we bring up parking as something that folks need. I think it's easy to characterize people who want parking as, I don't know, too lazy to use public transit. But one of the things that I think Detective Fallows brought up earlier today is, we still have a city where a lot of people's catalytic converters are just getting chopped off their car. So the idea of needing some kind of protective parking or parking close to your house where you can actually see your vehicle, it's not just a matter of convenience or the train not running at certain hours. Without a protected parking spot, you have the potential to lose your catalytic converter. And that happens to people in our neighborhood. And I wish it didn't. I wish that wasn't a concern. But I think we need to face the reality of that until it stops happening. All right, we have one more proposal to talk about this evening. Eric, I think this was Eric, the planner. Eric, I believe this is your project, the West Temple project. Who should we grant? Hi, Eric.
Hi. Yeah, so I believe we've got Jake here. I'm looking on the list of participants. Let's see if he's still with us.
I'm still here. Yep.
All right. Do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Can I? I'm a little scared to share my screen because my desktop's even worse than Jordan's. So I'm a little tentative to say share screen, but
just feel shame in advance. Just get it out. Get it over with.
I did. Let's see. Well, I clicked share screen. I don't know what happened now. Let's see. Oh, there we go. So our project that we're looking at is actually kitty corner of Jefferson Park. So we're staying right close in the neighborhood. So we're this parcel where the EMT currently has the EMT training center. And that's the parcel that we're looking at. So we're, first and foremost, thank you for hearing our proposal. We're really excited about what you have going on in the neighborhood. We are actually also the developer or partner developer on Colony B, which is going on just west of the station. So we love your neighborhood. It's super fun to hear all the things you have going on. I apologize, I got a COVID puppy and she's apparently my whole family left, so she's barking at me and being needy. So our proposal here, what we're asking for is it's in the CC zone, which allows for 3 stories, and through a conditional design review process, which is what we're starting, we can get an additional floor of height. And so our project, if I can, that we're proposing is 88 units. We do have parking in the rear off of the alley. And then this would be the front facade of the building here. We have kind of centralized amenity space for the tenants that have some big glass walls that will open up and activate the street. Really our main focus as we looked at the design, and even considering the new master plan, I know we could potentially go higher if we wait for the future master plan, but we looked at this particular site as a really good transition to, I guess, the part of the neighborhood that we were just talking about that has some of the more historic homes and is a little bit more residential than kind of the core of the Ballpark neighborhood. So we thought the 4-story product was a really good transition to that. And then we really focused on activating the street. And we did that by adding units that directly enter from the street onto West Temple by giving them some individual courtyards. And I'll show you, actually, we can look at the site plan here, adding street trees. So the trees were mentioned. So we do have both the street trees, new street lamps, and then also some trees in these kind of individual patio areas for the units that would face West Temple. Looking at the neighborhood, we're across the street from the row houses that we think did a really good job of kind of setting a rhythm for this part of West Temple of having the interaction with front porches as kind of a quasi public space, transitioning to the private space of these units. And so that was kind of really where our design has focused. And then the front of the building will have kind of this courtyard with some seating areas and a water feature where tenants could, from the upper floors, could hang out and catch an Uber or whatever it might be. So that was kind of the real focus. The additional floor helps us to really elevate some of the finishes as far as like getting brick and some more glass involved in the street, which was the goal. And what we're really excited to do is really put more eyes on Jefferson Park and kind of this transition getting from the more residential part of the neighborhood to the track stop. But we'd love to answer any questions you have. That's kind of the gist. We're really excited. We also have Todd Charlton with us, who is the lead designer, if there's any questions that I don't have an answer to, but happy to hear any questions you have.
It's always going to be my first question. Is this a for sale product or a rental?
This will be a market rate for rent project.
Do you know what our ratio of rental to owner occupied units is in our neighborhood, Jake?
I don't. If
It's
I could get
it's about
Sorry,
85 rental to 15% owner occupied.
It's on my short list. If you guys have a really good attorney who deals with condos and condo law, our investors are pretty nervous about condo law and condos, but it's definitely something we'd like to get into. So
I think it sounds like we might need to make this a priority in our station area plan. We might need to shift these regulations.
I would say from a standpoint of, as a developer, that's absolutely the biggest hurdle to doing more for sale product is just the fear of litigation for condos that comes back to the developer and ultimately back to the investors who are the ones who make a lot of the final decisions. But so I would support, if you make your voices heard, we would love to do more for sale product because I know there's a great need. So if you can Jake, sway any state legislators.
Can you give the 1 minute details on that, or 2 minute details on what this litigation is, or what the concern is?
Yeah, so the concern is in other locations. Like I went a few years back, there was years where no one had developed a single condo in Denver because there are certain groups of attorneys that will go and they'll actually purchase a condo unit in a condo complex like this, and they will tear it apart and look for a construction defect. And then they'll go to the HOA or the condo board, and they'll basically just sue the developers for construction defect. So it's kind of predatory litigation that's happened across the country. I will say we do have a little bit better state laws here that are a little bit more developer friendly, but it's still a concern for most lenders. But it's something we are looking.
Say, Jake, our state legislature is like 1/3 or 1/2 developers. My
I
goodness,
know,
how
I
could
know.
we make it more? Sorry, folks on here who are aimed at the state legislature or who are actively part of it. I know our good representative Joel Briscoe was on this call.
Yeah,
but you would think,
it's a little
given
bit better.
the makeup of the legislature, that would not be an issue.
It is a little bit better here, but it's still a fear, and it may be left over from other places. I don't know. So, but yeah, if you talk to a state legislator, definitely offer that up, that some additional protections I think would help. It would help particularly getting more of this kind of smaller unit home ownership as an option for sure. But I appreciate the feedback, because it's definitely something, as a developer, it's definitely something we think about. I know that's not worth anything to you guys at this point, but it's something we're looking into because we know it's a need. So our mission is to provide communities of opportunity for all. And so affordable housing and affordable home ownership is something that's definitely on our minds. But in this case, this product is a for lease product, but we're still really proud of it, and we feel like it would contribute to all the awesome things you guys have going on around Jefferson Park and what the neighborhood's becoming. But it's also, we love the idea that with this height, it could kind of transition away from the ballpark as you get deeper into the more residential part of the neighborhood. So anywho, I don't want to take up your whole.
Briscoe, could you comment on that at all? Oh, thank you.
So ask the question again, please.
Jake, it's your question. You're speaking to our state legislature.
Oh, yes, state legislator. Well, it was just additional protections, I think, for developers of for sale condo product. I think the threat of being sued keeps a lot of developers out of that product. So, well, I guess it's a plea for some additional coverages that would maybe.
I'd be surprised if there weren't protections against that already in Utah, given the power the developers have in the legislature. I mean, I'm happy to put my contact information. You're welcome to contact me. If there's issues where that's happening in Utah, let me know. I mean, my son lives in Portland, where a few years ago, the legislature said cities can zone for single family homes, but any builder can build 2 units on any single family home lot.
Mm-hmm.
And California passed some legislation, which I think it'd be very difficult to pass in Utah, in terms of helping
increase densities.
Helping builders build.
Yeah.
But if that's going on in Utah, I've given you my phone number and I've given you my email, and I'd be happy to visit with you if there's people who are abusing that today.
Yeah, and I haven't had any direct experience with it. I think it's a lot of it comes through the grapevine. So, but we definitely love to learn, as far as for us to understand what legislation exists here to make sure we can help our lenders and investors feel comfortable that might be a product that we could offer in the future.
So, well, Amy, while I've got the mic, Dan posted earlier, what are we going to do about EV charging? Edge Homes, Give Group, some of the Ivory Home multi-unit housing. There are a handful of builders in the state who are building multi-unit housing, who are currently building for a future of battery electric vehicle charging. They aren't putting in EV chargers, but they're putting in the panels and the wiring necessary. It's not a state law that it's required yet, although we passed legislation dealing with HOAs and community associations by Senator Harper that says, if you live in if you own a building, if you own or an owner in a condo or something run by a community association or HOA, and you're willing to pay the full cost, they cannot prevent you from putting in charging.
And I believe, Eric, I believe that's a part of the city's transportation as far as we have to have a certain amount of parking stalls that provide.
But if someone had a deed to a property and they had stall 23 and they said, I want to put in a level 2 charger, and they were willing to pay the installation costs and, and the extra additional cost of electricity, they have to be allowed, starting July 1, 2022, they have to be allowed to you have to allow them to put it in.
Cool. Well, we're definitely not one who would be opposed to that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the key is to get a lot of new construction to put it in, because it's much easier to do it up front than it is to retrofit.
Yeah.
And 5% of all the vehicles purchased in Utah in July, August, and September, and it was similar in October, November, December, of all the new vehicles purchased, 1 out of every 20 light trucks or cars was a battery electric vehicle or plug-in hybrid. 2 years ago, it was 1%. It's now 5%. We're not California, we're not 13, but we're at 5. We're 1 out of every 20. And a couple of years from now, it's 1 in 10, and then it goes to 1 in 5. It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah. Great.
Got a few questions in the chat. I'm not sure if you've seen them.
Oh, sure.
Asking about the nature of the patios and the benefit for 4th floor, those sorts of things.
Sorry, let me find. Oh yeah, we did have a comment about it's also hard. It's more expensive for the design firm to get liability insurance on condo units. We've looked at a couple condos and had design firms that said they just won't do it. And 2 contractors also said they wouldn't build condos. So let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to read through them.
Sorry, Joel, I think Darren may have just logged off.
Oh, it looks like Eric answered some of them. So the zone allows for 30 feet. The additional height is 45 feet, but we do have to go before the planning commission. And then there were some additional design requirements that were also associated with kind of how this front area works.
I can just see mine allowed. I was just curious about the little stoops or porches. I can't really tell from the photos. Are they all cement, or is there attempt to make it more green than just the little boxes?
No, yeah, no. There would be some plantings kind of around and delineating the individual kind of semi-private patios for each of the units.
Because will the entrance be like the units, the condos across the street, or I don't know if those are condos or not, that's their actual entrance, or do they enter through the building?
Both. So they could enter through the main, so this is the main entrance to the building that then goes to a central corridor, but the units on the ground floor have their own separate entrance from the street. And that was one of the things we wanted to do to just help integrate the building with the street. And then we also liked kind of what they had done across the street. I think they did a really good job with those small front yard landscapes to just create a little space where folks can hang out on their front porch and that type of thing.
I don't know if anyone has comments who lives in the neighborhood in those. I don't personally live in one, but I always think I'm a big walker, and just like a little bit more protection or privacy, because I feel like people underutilize them because it's also a
A little
sidewalk. Yeah.
too open. Yeah.
Yeah. So just a comment on that of making it a little bit more private for them to be able to enjoy an outside
Stay out
space.
there. Yeah. And that was also, as far as our units go, that's one of the things these glass doors will open into amenity space to kind of create some indoor outdoor for the upper units so that they can hang out with the doors open and kind of get the feel of that as well. But no, I think that's good feedback, and we'll keep that in mind as we work with our landscaper to get these a little bit further down the road.
I'd like to, one question, I might have missed this earlier. Is this the EMS services building?
Yes.
Currently?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And I like that you're adding street engagement, much like the row homes across the street from this project, where there's entrances to the street versus just one entrance into this building. But yeah, the patios do concern me a little bit. If they're just concrete and don't provide a lot of a green space. That's something our neighborhood is definitely struggles with not having enough of. But I do love that you're putting the entrances to all those bottom units onto the street. So
thank you. Great.
All right, good dialogue.
My question wasn't answered. I was curious about the fourth
please.
floor. I know I know this isn't zoned for 4 floors, it's zoned for 3 currently. I imagine it's a lease property, so you want to maximize your investment, but why not happy with 3? And then the other question and concern is that doesn't feel like enough parking spots for the number of units, and parking here is already difficult given the baseball stadium.
Yeah, so we meet the requirements of the ordinance as far as the parking goes, and then the 4th floor, really it's just looking at the transition of the neighborhood, of where it's headed, and felt like it was a really good fit for that. It is a conditional use, so it's not a rezone. It's allowed. It's an allowed request as a conditional use in the current ordinance. There are some additional design requirements, so it adds to an elevated finish level. So the additional floor helps us to offset some of the costs of being able to do like more brick on the ground floor, some of the additional landscaping. It allows for an elevated product, and so that's really why the request. If you take off that additional revenue, particularly in the construction costs, where construction costs are so high right now, it's harder to get some of these nicer finishes into a project if we lose that floor, for better or worse. Sometimes that's just the way it goes, and construction costs are pretty crazy right now.
How many parking spaces per unit would this project have?
So we're at a half a stall per unit. And they're smaller units, so they're not like 2 and 3 bedroom units. They're all studio units.
Jeff Sandstrom has a good question about how does this height compare to the row house across the street?
So it's basically just one additional floor. I don't know what their full height is. They look like they're probably they're a different zone. I think it's CG across the street, I believe. I could be wrong.
They're RMF 35.
Yeah, so they can go up to RMF 35 can go up to 35 feet. Those look like they're probably closer to 35, and we're at 45, so it's just an additional story. One of the reasons too, as far as the design goes, we looked at kind of the building and adding this horizontal kind of break and relief and change of materials was to kind of keep some of that same feel as far as the height goes, so that it split up the height difference. But we feel like it's a really great transition, particularly when looking at the master plan. It potentially in the next year or so could go to 5 to 7 stories on West Temple. We still feel like this was cognizant of where the neighborhood's at right now, and made for a good transition in stepping down to the outer part of the neighborhood.
Have you communicated with the housing authority about their project next door, the future Book Cliff Lodge?
We have, if you guys have, we're actually partnering with them on another project on North Temple, and we approached them to originally do something together. When we first got interested in this, we hoped we could convince them to partner up, but they're pretty far down the road with their project there already, and theirs is 4 stories next door. That one was approved for the same conditional height, although I'm not sure if where that's at, because I know they went through that process a while back. So I think we're playing nice in the sandbox, though, as far as we'll kind of mirror their height and that they're going for on their site.
Hi, this is Fraser Nelson. I don't know how to raise my hand, so I apologize. Can I just jump in?
Go for it.
Amy, I apologize. I don't mean to be rude. And you know, Job, you've got a question too, and you have your hand up. So I live in the row house townhomes right across the street. I have 2 concerns about this project. I think it's attractive, and I appreciate the desire to have nice finishes, and thank you for mirroring and creating, you know, people that can be on our street. I have two concerns though. One is personal. I will lose all the light into my apartment, and I will also lose my view. And it'll be really personally for me detrimental in a way that I know doesn't affect everybody else in the neighborhood, but certainly those of us that live directly across from you will experience a very different experience. And the second I have is that, you know, I've been reading these ballpark planning reports, et cetera, and I know that Jefferson can use more eyes on it, so to speak, our park, but we need more green space. And it seems to me that we keep on adding people or talk about adding people without necessarily adding the amenities that people need. We have very little green space. We talk about it a lot, but I don't see a lot of action. We don't have, you know, and I just wonder if 3 stories how many fewer people does that mean for you in terms of rentals? And would you do the project at 3 stories, which fits right now with our neighborhood? And I think also keeps in mind the lack of places for people to go. So congratulations on an attractive building. I just don't want it to be so tall. And I don't want quite such quick influx of folks without more green space. Thank you for taking my comment.
Yeah.
The other question that I ask incessantly, Jake, pardon, is could you tell me about the external lighting on the building, and will it be on all the time? Will it be?
Yeah. So
and I ask that because we have a distinct lack of pedestrian level lighting in our neighborhood. When there's a game going on, it's great. Everybody's walking around, plenty of light, but you know, that's only a few months out of the year. And the rest of the time, we're super interested in developers that are interested in putting in pedestrian level lighting.
Yeah, we'll have, I mean, and we showed the light here. That's one of the requirements, the additional requirements of the design review processes is getting some of that additional lighting for the patios. We want it to feel safe both for the neighborhood and for our tenants. The parking lot will also be lit, and then we are also adding two new street lights along our frontage. So that will be a part of it for sure. And we also have, the other thing that's helpful is we'll have a substantial amount of security cameras and those types of things to add another level of security as well. So yes, lighting, we tried to portray it here as it will be. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. Did I miss any other?
I'm not sure if you caught the question about how many people per floor Because I think the building's 88 units, right? So is it just
So it's
88
22,
divided,
yeah,
22 units
22.
of floor?
Yeah. And then we've got a fairly good size amenity kind of, we look at it as like each floor kind of becomes their own little mini neighborhood. So each floor has its own amenity space as you get off of the elevator, where if you want to have friends over, since they're studio units, you can kind of hang out in the amenity spaces that are in this central corridor here.
Just so I understand you, Jake, this is Fraser again. Are you saying that this project is not feasible at 4 floors, that you can't do it at 3?
Regrettably, no, unless you can if you can get the landowner to sell it to us for cheaper, then we maybe could, but it's pretty tough right now to get land for cheap enough to do that.
But when you're saying that you're seeking a variance, if you don't get the variance, you won't do the project?
We've looked at it as townhomes, but the townhomes, you end up with a lot more driveway, then you actually lose more landscaping. So one of the things that this plan puts forward is we actually increase the landscaping from the minimum required. And so that's another piece of getting the additional height. Is we increased exterior green space, we would lose that to more driveway in order to get a townhome project to work. And even a townhome project, we have to also go through other because it has multiple buildings, we have to go through a plan development process. So it's a different process. It's actually more of a rezone process than this, which is a conditional use. As long as we meet certain standards, it's something we can ask for.
Hey, and real quick, would the townhomes be for sale or owner occupied, or?
We haven't even considered those at this point, to be honest. Initially, when we were looking at it, we actually thought that the new master plan was finalized. We didn't know it was just a draft was finalized in December. We thought the whole plan was finalized. So we were thinking we would even propose a full rezone on this one and go for 5 stories. But then as we looked further into it's a draft plan and looking at kind of some of the stuff that you guys have talked about today, as we looked at the neighborhood from afar, like 4 stories just felt like a better transition to where the neighborhood's going, while still being cognizant of you who have made this neighborhood great to begin with. So we hoped that it would feel like a compromise at this point, and we feel like it's a really good project that we're proud of, and we believe it'll add value to the neighborhood and add some safety and some eyes on the street. But I absolutely understand the concerns if you've lived across the street and haven't had a 4-story building. I absolutely get that.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for putting in that comment. Sorry, I guess I'm reading the comments and realizing, are these all studios, or they're studios and family units?
These are all studio units.
I see.
I'm trying to see any more.
I again am new to this, so I raised my hand, but I didn't know if you could see it, so I just start talking. Hi. So if you're talking 88 studio units and a half a parking space per unit, what do you estimate then the amount of cars for the entire complex? What are your projections on that?
I mean, I'm not a traffic engineer, so I don't know that I would project a number. I think we feel confident that there will be a portion of folks that will use the train. I mean, I think that's kind of the vision, is we put in a lot of money into the transit, and that's for a reason. I think long term, we look at even the parking lot in the back as potentially could in the future convert to either additional green space or something else. I know there's a transition while we get used to having folks without cars. We've even looked at potentially doing some car share programs or other things while that transition happens, but we still feel very confident that as it's zoned, and that's what it's zoned for, that the city took enough time, and as they went through the zoning ordinance, to look at traffic studies, to look at other areas around transit. And that's, so we designed to that and to what was required by the ordinance, kind of with confidence that the city planners take a lot of time to prepare those and do traffic studies, and we trust that.
Understood. I guess my other question then would be, why all studios? And why not more of a range of types of living environments?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we like the idea of kind of a concentrated demographic as we look at it's not a huge project. 88 units isn't huge, and so it helps us to concentrate the amenities to kind of a certain demographic. Also, just the demographic of that we're at a track stop. We want to add folks who are in that period of life that's beneficial. It's also, because of the studios, it's naturally occurring affordability. So we'll meet, according to HUD standards, we'll at market rate, we'll meet an affordable rental rate. So it's kind of a toggle of all of those things. We feel like it's, when you're on a track stop, it's just some additional density feels like the right thing to do, to be able to get more people on the train and using the transit.
So could you estimate then what kind of rents you would charge for these 365-foot studio units?
Yeah, they'll be around $1,000 a month for rent, which in the city right now, anything from Ballpark to downtown studios are like $1,400 to $1,600 a month. So there's a level of affordability that we can add by doing all studios. It also, that's another way that we get some higher finishes too, because it gets us a little bit more revenue because there's more units per floor. So that helps us to do a little bit better project.
Shelley's asking the question of the day. What are we going to do about that 7-Eleven? A thing that we have all wondered for years. Because gosh, it doesn't seem like playing opera is necessarily the cure-all that we've all hoped it would be. Anybody who's been by that 7-Eleven knows what I'm talking about. Yes? Okay. It's a really loud opera.
Very loud.
I mean, I think for our standpoint, one of the things, just for what it's worth, I do think more bodies making that trek. I know, I mean, we're building right on the track stop right now, and there is still a rougher crowd, but I do think the more bodies we can get into these homes, it naturally will help to kind of alleviate some of that, getting more eyes on the street in these areas. So
I haven't actually seen studies that support that, and I've looked for it. And one of the things that I think is curious is that just anonymous density, I don't think necessarily deters crime. Long-term relationships in neighborhoods deter crime. Knowing your neighbors deters crime, but short-term renters, not. I haven't seen those studies, and I look for them. So I don't know if just densifying an area is actually shown to reduce crime. In fact, in general, of course, making an area more dense increases crime because there's just more bodies there. That's why there's more crime in cities relative to rural areas, just by the numbers, not per capita. It's a thing that I've been paying attention to for a while.
For sure.
Which is why we keep asking about for sale units.
It's duly noted. I'm gonna figure out a way to do one. We'll figure that out.
Yes, transiency actually increases crime, having more rentals than actual homeowners.
And I
increases crime in general.
That makes sense to me. Yeah, if you could get the 7-Eleven to sell, maybe we could do some for sale condos on the 7-Eleven site. We'd be open to it if you know the owners.
Those folks change over. We've communicated with them before because, you know,
Yeah,
we have actually tried with the 7-Eleven addressing the root issues. We found that the Maverick actually did a pretty good job of cleaning up, but it took somebody getting killed there before they really took action.
yeah.
Hopefully we won't need that to happen at the 7-Eleven.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we absolutely appreciate all of your time. I don't know, Eric, I don't know, is there a vote or something of that nature, or what's our next step?
This will go to the Planning Commission. We're hoping for early July. That's probably about the time frame we're looking at right now. But obviously everyone here will receive notice of that once it's been fully reviewed and the time frame is up for public notice and things like that. And we'll you'll see it go to the Planning Commission. Please feel free. I'll put my email in the chat. If anyone has any comments they want to submit to the Planning Commission, please feel free to send them to me.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for your time. We absolutely appreciate hopefully being another part of your neighborhood, but we appreciate your time and your feedback.
Great, thank you. And Eric, there's been a lot of comments in the chat. Would you mind dumping your email in there again, please? Thank you. I'll try to collate some of these into a letter. All right, folks. Thank you so much for your time. I wish we could solve the 7-Eleven problem tonight or any night. Thank you, Dr. Plum.
Thank you for the opportunity to listen and learn. This is there's a lot, so I appreciate it.
There is a lot. This is actually a very typical meeting, Dr. Plum, in terms of the number of development related issues and public safety issues.
Glad you
anybody can disagree with me if they want, but this feels about par for the course.
Glad y'all are having the dialogue space. Thank you.
Thank the city library.
I love those libraries, you know that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, take good care, everyone.
Thanks especially for the new folks who signed in tonight. Lee, never met you before. You prepared visual aids. That's pretty amazing.
I honestly didn't know this was a thing, and I've been in the neighborhood for 11 years. I never got like a mail or anything, so
it's I was this much budget.
yeah, I was very surprised to see this in my door when I got home from work. No, it's not.
I see. Well, I will happily add you to our email list, and if you're on the book face, we have a group on there.
I don't use that too much. It's
well,
too much junk.
There's a lot of junk, but we, you know, with our budget as it is, we look to those sorts of methods to disseminate information. But we also I send about 2 emails a month, so it shouldn't be
email
too much garbage.
Email I do check, so that would be perfect.
I'll be happy to add you to the list.
Yes, please do. I'll get on Facebook maybe and look at that, but no promises there. Emails.
No, I'm sorry. Choice. It's not the greatest, but like, what are we supposed to do? Build a website that people go find?